The wind howls softly through the alpine valleys. In the thin mountain air, the Roman legions march in tense silence, their armor glinting faintly beneath the fading summer sun. Every man among the 50,000 soldiers knows what lies ahead: civil war. But none of them can imagine that this campaign will decide the fate of the Roman Empire itself. It is the year 394 CE, and Emperor Theodosius I, ruler of the Eastern Roman Empire, is marching westward. His goal is not conquest of foreign lands, but the reclaiming of Rome's own heart, the Western Empire now torn apart by betrayal. 2 years earlier, the young Emperor Valentinian II had died under suspicious circumstances, found hanging in his palace. His powerful general Arbogast claimed it was suicide, yet few believed him. The whispers of assassination spread quickly, and soon the empire split between loyalty and rebellion. Arbogast, refusing to submit to the authority of the East, placed his own puppet, Eugenius, on the Western throne. It was a direct challenge to Theodosius's legitimacy, and the emperor's patience had run out. Now, with his elite generals, including his most trusted commander, Stilicho, Theodosius prepares to face the rebel armies waiting beyond the mountains. As the troops trudge through the rugged Julian Alps, the atmosphere is heavy with uncertainty. Many fear the coming battle, not only for its scale, but for what it represents: Roman against Roman, brother against brother. The empire that once ruled the world now turns its swords inward. At the heart of this tense march rides Stilicho, a man who embodies Rome's contradictions. Born of mixed blood, half Roman, half Vandal, he is both insider and outsider. To the emperor, he is loyal and brilliant. To the Roman elite, he is a reminder of how fragile their world has become. In just a few days, these mountains will echo with the clash of steel and the cries of men. The battle ahead will not only decide who rules Rome, but also reveal the character of the man who would come to be known as the half-barbarian savior of an empire on the edge of collapse. And that is where our story begins, in the cold shadows of the Julian Alps, on the eve of one of Rome's last great struggles for survival. Before the clash of empires, before his name became both feared and admired, Stilicho was simply the son of two worlds, one Roman, one barbarian. His father was a soldier of Vandal descent, a people the Romans labelled as outsiders, yet who often fought under Roman banners. His mother, by contrast, was Roman, connecting him, by blood, to the civilization that called itself eternal. From a young age, Stilicho learned to navigate this dual identity. He trained as a soldier, mastering discipline, tactics, and diplomacy, the arts that kept Rome alive as much as any sword. He rose quickly through the ranks, earning a reputation for intelligence, calm judgment, and fierce loyalty. In a time when most barbarians were seen as mercenaries or threats, Stilicho stood apart. He was a man who could speak both the language of the legions and the tongue of the frontier tribes. Fate brought him to the attention of the greatest ruler of his time, Emperor Theodosius I, a man who understood the value of loyalty above birth. Theodosius saw in Stilicho not a foreigner, but a soldier of remarkable promise, someone who could command armies and inspire men. The emperor entrusted him with key missions, eventually promoting him to command the elite imperial guard. But Stilicho's rise was not just military, it was personal. In a decision that shocked many within the Roman Senate, Theodosius arranged for Stilicho to marry his adopted daughter, Serena. With this marriage, the half-barbarian soldier became part of the imperial family itself. To the Roman aristocracy, it was scandalous. To Theodosius, it was strategic, a way to bind strength and loyalty to the throne. Through this union, Stilicho gained both influence and enemies. Many whispered that a man of mixed blood could never truly serve Rome's interests. Yet Theodosius trusted him more than anyone else, and in the coming years, that trust would be tested in fire. As the empire drifted toward another civil war, Stilicho would no longer be a mere soldier. He would become Theodosius's sword, his shield, and perhaps his greatest gamble, a man caught between two worlds, standing at the edge of history. The year is 394 CE, and the Roman Empire stands divided once again. On one side, Theodosius I, Emperor of the East, marches with his loyal generals, among them the ever-watchful Stilicho. On the other, the rebellious general Arbogast commands the armies of the West, with his puppet Emperor Eugenius ruling from behind him. Two Roman worlds, once united, are now preparing to destroy each other. Theodosius's army climbs through the rugged Julian Alps, descending into the valley near the river Frigidus, in what is now Slovenia. It is here that the fate of the Roman world will be decided. Theodosius's forces number around 50,000 men, legions from the east, allied Gothic warriors, and federate troops under Stilicho's direct command. Opposing them is Arbogast's massive western army, fortified and ready. The first day of battle is a disaster. The federate troops, mostly Goths and other barbarian allies, charge bravely into the fray, but are slaughtered. Over 10,000 men cut down in a single assault. The survivors retreat, exhausted and demoralized. Arbogast celebrates victory that night, confident the rebellion will soon be complete. But Stilicho and Theodosius are not finished. As dawn breaks, a fierce Bora wind sweeps through the valley, blowing dust and debris straight into the faces of Arbogast's soldiers. Seeing an opportunity, Stilicho rallies his troops. Under the roaring wind, the imperial army strikes again. Arrows from the enemy are blown off course, and confusion spreads. The eastern troops charge, shattering the western lines and capturing their camp. The rebellion collapses. Eugenius is executed, and Arbogast, the once proud general, flees into the mountains, wandering for days before taking his own life. The empire, for a brief and shining moment, is whole again, east and west, reunited under one emperor. Theodosius has triumphed, but at a terrible cost. Tens of thousands of soldiers, many of them Rome's best, lie dead. And within this victory lies the seed of future tragedy. For among the survivors stands Stilicho, the half-barbarian general who now commands unmatched respect and envy. What he does next will shape not only his destiny, but the final century of the Roman Empire itself. The victory at the Frigidus River brought temporary unity, but peace in Rome was always fragile, like marble with hidden cracks. Theodosius returned to the imperial capital weary, but victorious, praised as the man who had saved the empire once more. Yet, behind the parades and triumphs, his health was failing. The emperor, who had carried the burden of two worlds, would not live to see the future he fought for. In the winter of 395 CE, Theodosius fell gravely ill. Knowing that his death was near, he made arrangements for the succession. His two sons were still boys. Arcadius, 18 years old, was to rule the Eastern Empire. Honorius, just 10, would take the Western throne. Both were far too young and inexperienced to lead an empire collapsing under its own weight. And so, on his deathbed, Theodosius turned to the one man he trusted more than any other, Stilicho. According to Stilicho's own account, the emperor privately appointed him as guardian of both sons, entrusting him with the protection of the entire Roman world. Whether this claim was truth or clever politics, no one can say for sure. But what mattered was that Theodosius believed Stilicho could hold the empire together. When the emperor died in January of 395, the Roman world mourned and trembled. His death marked the end of an era. For generations, the empire had survived by sheer force of will from strong emperors. Now it was divided again, split between two young rulers and a single man who sought to guide them both. But not everyone welcomed Stilicho's new power. In Constantinople, the Eastern court was already under the sway of ambitious advisors and politicians who viewed Stilicho's guardianship as a threat. Rufinus, a ruthless general and political manipulator, convinced the young Arcadius to reject Stilicho's authority outright. The stage was set for a new kind of war not fought with legions, but with decrees, whispers, and betrayal. Stilicho may have held command of the West, but the East now saw him as a rival. And for a man trying to defend the empire from within and without, that division would prove deadly. The empire was once again split in two, and Stilicho now stood alone between its breaking halves. Power in Rome was never won solely on the battlefield. Often, it was lost in marble halls, whispered behind silk curtains. For Stilicho, this truth became painfully clear after Theodosius's death. Though he held command over the Western Empire, his claim to guardianship over the East immediately ignited fury in Constantinople. In the Eastern court, Rufinus, a cunning and ambitious statesman, rose quickly by manipulating the young emperor Arcadius. He viewed Stilicho not as an ally, but as a dangerous rival, a man of barbarian blood who dared to claim imperial authority. To weaken him, Rufinus spread rumors that Stilicho sought to make himself emperor, a whisper that would haunt the general for the rest of his life. As political tension grew, the situation on the empire's borders worsened. Barbarian tribes, restless and emboldened, began to raid Roman territories. Among them was a name that would soon echo through history: Alaric, leader of the Goths. Once allies of Rome, the Goths felt betrayed after Theodosius's death. They had shed blood for an empire that now dismissed them without reward. When Alaric began plundering cities in Greece and the Balkans, Stilicho saw a chance to prove his loyalty. He gathered his forces and marched eastward, determined to stop the Gothic threat and restore order. His campaign was swift and decisive. Alaric's forces were cornered, surrounded, and nearly crushed. But just as victory seemed certain, an order arrived from Constantinople. Stilicho was to withdraw immediately. The command came from Arcadius himself, or more accurately, from Rufinus, who feared that Stilicho's triumph would make him too powerful. Obedient to imperial decree, Stilicho reluctantly pulled back his troops. Alaric escaped. Greece burned again, and in the east, Rufinus celebrated briefly. For soon after, Rufinus was assassinated by his own soldiers, cut down during a parade. Some whispered that Stilicho had orchestrated the killing from afar, using his influence within the army. Others said it was simply poetic justice. But Rufinus's death did not bring peace. His successor, Eutropius, an ambitious eunuch with a cruel streak, would prove even more dangerous. With each new rival, Stilicho's dream of a united empire drifted further away, replaced by suspicion, betrayal, and the first cracks of a collapsing world. As Stilicho fought to balance power between the East and West, one name refused to fade from his horizon: Alaric, the Gothic leader who had once marched under the Roman banner. Once allies, now adversaries, their fates would intertwine like storm and flame for the next 2 decades. After Rufinus's death, the Eastern court came under the control of Eutropius, who sought to destroy Stilicho's influence completely. When Stilicho tried once again to hunt down Alaric's forces in Greece, Eutropius intervened, declaring him a public enemy of the Eastern Empire. He confiscated Stilicho's lands in the east, stripped his honours, and spread accusations of disloyalty. For a man who had spent his life defending Rome, it was a humiliation beyond words. Meanwhile, Alaric, ever the opportunist, exploited this chaos brilliantly. He gathered his forces, burning cities and enslaving Roman citizens as he carved a path through Greece and the Balkans. The Eastern court, desperate to stop the destruction, made a shocking decision. Instead of fighting him, they bought his loyalty. Alaric was granted a high command in the Roman army, appointed Magister Militum of Illyricum, the very region bordering Stilicho's territory in the west. To Stilicho, this was more than an insult. It was a betrayal. A barbarian warlord, once defeated and dismissed, now held a Roman title and commanded troops against him. Yet, Stilicho was too pragmatic to lash out blindly. He turned his focus back to the Western Front, where rebellion and unrest were spreading in North Africa, Rome's most vital grain supplier. There, another traitor emerged. Gildo, governor of Africa, declared loyalty to the Eastern Empire. If Africa fell, Rome itself would starve. Stilicho reacted swiftly, sending Gildo's own brother, Massazel, to crush the revolt. Within months, Gildo was captured and executed. Rome was fed again, for now. But Stilicho knew the deeper threat was not Gildo, nor Rufinus, nor Eutropius. It was the decay within Rome itself. Senators too greedy to fight, emperors too young to rule, and enemies too proud to forgive. And above all these, looming in the shadows, was Alaric, whose ambition was growing bolder. The man who once served Rome would soon return not as an ally, but as the spark that would set the eternal city aflame. The years following the chaos in Greece tested Stilicho like never before. The empire's borders were collapsing, its treasury shrinking, and its armies thinning. Yet, amid the political storms, he remained Rome's most capable defender, a soldier who understood that survival depended on swift action and unrelenting resolve. In 401 CE, while Stilicho was stationed in the northern provinces to guard against invasions, disaster struck. Taking advantage of his absence, Alaric led his Gothic army across the Alps into Italy itself. For the first time in generations, the shadow of a foreign army fell across the Italian heartland. Towns burned, villages were emptied, and panic spread all the way to the imperial court in Milan, where the young emperor Honorius resided. Stilicho moved fast. Despite snow blocking the mountain passes, he forced his way back into Italy with a small but elite force. His arrival saved the empire's core at the last possible moment. Honorius, who had fled Milan in terror, was nearly captured, but Stilicho's intervention turned the tide. The Roman army clashed with the Goths in 2 fierce battles at Pollentia and later at Verona. Against all odds, Stilicho triumphed both times. Alaric's army was shattered, and his ambitions at least temporarily crushed. The victory restored Roman confidence, and Stilicho's name spread across the empire as a hero. For the second time, he had saved Rome from destruction. But glory never came without a price. The Senate, dominated by arrogant aristocrats, grew resentful of his success. To them, Stilicho's victories came not from Roman virtue, but from barbarian cunning and insult to their pride. His army relied heavily on foederati, allied barbarian troops, which the elite viewed as a sign of weakness. Still, Stilicho pressed on. A few years later, in 405 CE, another massive invasion threatened Italy. Tens of thousands of warriors led by Radagaisus, a Gothic king determined to burn Rome itself. Stilicho again rallied a coalition of Romans, Alans, and Huns, trapping the invaders in northern Italy. The siege ended with Radagaisus captured and executed. So many barbarians were enslaved afterward that the slave markets of Rome collapsed from oversupply. For a brief moment, it seemed the empire might yet survive, thanks to the half-barbarian general who fought harder for Rome than most Romans ever would. After years of victory on the battlefield, Stilicho found himself trapped in a far deadlier war. The silent, invisible one fought inside the imperial palace. His greatest enemies were no longer on the frontiers, but in the marble corridors of power. Rome's senators, fattened on wealth and nostalgia, despised Stilicho's reforms. He had tried to rebuild the army, calling for new recruits from among the common people. But the aristocrats objected. Conscription meant fewer workers for their estates, fewer profits for their families. To them, the defense of Rome was less important than the comfort of their villas. At the same time, the court around the young Emperor Honorius began to twist against Stilicho. The emperor, still insecure and easily influenced, became prey to flatterers who envied the general's power. Among them was Olympius, a court official whose calm words hid a ruthless ambition. Olympius whispered poison into Honorius's ear, painting Stilicho as dangerous a barbarian schemer who sought the throne for himself and his son. Meanwhile, the empire's borders were unraveling once again. Across the Rhine, barbarian tribes, Vandals, Alans, and Suebi broke through in waves, overrunning Gaul. In Britain, a Roman general named Constantine III declared himself emperor, leading a rebellion that seized control of most of the western provinces. Despite these crises, Stilicho remained Rome's only real strategist. He planned to reunite the fractured empire through diplomacy and force even, considering an alliance with Alaric to strengthen the West. But his vision terrified his enemies. If successful, he would be unstoppable. Then came the news that Emperor Arcadius of the East had died, leaving behind a child heir. Stilicho saw an opportunity to unite the empire again, but Olympius saw his chance to strike. He warned Honorius that Stilicho intended to seize both thrones to crown his son Eucharius as emperor of the East. Suspicion hardened into paranoia. By the summer of 408 CE, Rome's greatest general was surrounded by lies. The Senate distrusted him, the army doubted him, and the emperor feared him. The same man who had saved Rome 3 times now stood alone, betrayed not by enemies beyond its walls, but by the decaying empire he had fought so hard to protect. By the summer of 408 CE, the fate of Stilicho was sealed not by swords, but by whispers. Emperor Honorius, weak and frightened, had come to see his greatest protector as his most dangerous enemy. The lies spun by Olympius and other courtiers had taken root too deeply. In their stories, Stilicho was no longer Rome's savior. He was a traitor plotting to seize the empire for himself. When the emperor traveled north to the military camp at Pavia, Olympius struck. He roused the soldiers with rumors that Stilicho planned to overthrow Honorius. Rage erupted. Chaos spread through the camp. and a massacre began. Hundreds of Stilicho's officers and loyal supporters were cut down, men who had fought beside him for years. Those who survived fled for their lives. Hearing of the revolt, Stilicho knew what was coming. He retreated to a church in Ravenna, seeking sanctuary. Loyal troops gathered outside, ready to defend him, but Stilicho refused to let them fight. He had shed enough Roman blood in his life. He would not spill it now. On August 22, 408, imperial soldiers surrounded the church. They promised safety if he surrendered, but it was a lie. Once outside, Stilicho was arrested on false charges of treason. He faced his executioners calmly, a man who had saved an empire that no longer wanted to be saved. Before his death, he gave one last order. His soldiers were not to avenge him. Then, with quiet dignity, Stilicho, Rome's half-barbarian guardian, was beheaded. His death unleashed a storm. Olympius ordered the arrest and execution of Stilicho's family and allies. His son Eucharius was hunted down and killed. His wife Serena, niece of Theodosius himself, was accused of conspiracy and executed as well. Then came the most catastrophic act of all. In a frenzy of fear and hatred, Roman officials ordered the massacre of thousands of barbarian families living peacefully within the empire, wives and children of Gothic soldiers who had once fought under Stilicho's command. The surviving Gothic warriors, enraged and broken, turned to a familiar leader for revenge, Alaric, and soon Rome would face the unthinkable, the vengeance of the men it had betrayed. In the months after Stilicho's execution, the Western Roman Empire began to crumble, like an ancient statue cracking under its own weight. The man who had held it together through war, famine, rebellion, and betrayal was gone, and without him there was no one left capable of keeping Rome safe. The massacre of the Gothic families, an act born of paranoia and cruelty, became the empire's final mistake. Thousands of Gothic soldiers, who had once served loyally under Stilicho, deserted the Roman army in outrage. They joined forces under King Alaric, the same man Stilicho had defeated and spared years earlier. Now, Alaric was no longer Rome's problem. He was its executioner. In 409 CE, Alaric marched his vast army into Italy, meeting little resistance. City after city fell, not because his army was unstoppable, but because Rome's leaders were divided, corrupt, and blind. Emperor Honorius, trembling in the fortified city of Ravenna, refused to negotiate or lead. The Senate, desperate and confused, begged Alaric for peace. He asked only for fair treatment, land for his people, payment for his soldiers, and a position in the Roman army. Honorius refused. And so, in 410 CE, Alaric gave the order that would echo through history. His Gothic army surrounded Rome, the eternal city once the heart of civilization, now weakened and alone. After a brief siege, the gates were opened, and for the first time in 800 years, Rome fell to a foreign army. For 3 days, the city was plundered. Churches were looted, palaces stripped, families enslaved. Statues of emperors and gods toppled into the streets. Yet even Alaric seemed mournful. He reportedly forbade unnecessary slaughter and sought to protect sacred sites. But the symbolism was undeniable. The eternal city had fallen, and with it, the illusion of Roman invincibility. Soon after, Alaric himself died, perhaps from illness or exhaustion, leaving behind both victory and ruin. The Western Empire would limp on for a few more decades, but its spirit was already broken. Theodosius's dream of unity was gone. Stilicho's sacrifice had been erased. And as Europe drifted into the dark centuries that followed, one truth remained. When Stilicho fell, Rome lost its last defender, and with him its final chance to survive. The story of Stilicho is more than a tale of war and betrayal. It is the story of an empire on the edge of collapse, and of one man who tried, against impossible odds, to hold it together. For over a decade, he fought not only enemies at Rome's borders, but also corruption, jealousy, and fear within its own heart. He was a soldier born of two worlds, Roman discipline and barbarian blood, and in that combination lay both his strength and his downfall. To the emperors he served, Stilicho was indispensable. To the Roman Senate, he was a threat. To the people, he was a savior they did not fully understand until it was too late. His life reminds us that history often forgets those who stand in between, those who bridge cultures, who try to reconcile enemies, who fight for unity when the world is breaking apart. Stilicho's tragedy was not simply that he died. It was that Rome refused to see his value until after he was gone. When we look at the fall of the Western Roman Empire, it is easy to point to invasions, economic collapse, or political decay. But deeper than all of that was a failure of trust, a civilization that turned against its own protectors, consumed by pride and paranoia. And once Rome betrayed Stilicho, it betrayed itself. His execution marked more than the end of a man. It marked the beginning of the end for the empire he fought to save. 2 years later, the Eternal City fell to Alaric's Goths, and the world entered a new age, one of kings and tribes, ruins and legends. Yet amid that darkness, Stilicho's legacy endures as one of courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. So, as we close this chapter, remember that history's greatest heroes are not always the ones who win sometimes. They are the ones who stand their ground, even when defeat is certain. Stilicho was one of them. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of Rome's most tragic and fascinating stories. If you enjoyed learning about Stilicho, the half-barbarian who tried to save an empire, do not forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives into history's forgotten figures.